So, a little fun fact for you. This episode of My Hero Academia was trending on Twitter. Maybe not as long as Demon Slayer, but it was trending worldwide for a few hours when it aired in Japan yesterday morning. And it's kind of impressive, honestly. It's just really impressive just to see that my boy Suneater basically made it to the top on social media and caused the episode of My Hero Academia's latest episode to trend. So, it's a nice feat. It's a really nice feat for My Hero Academia. It's a nice little badge of honor, I guess, to add to its back, because it actually trended worldwide, which, as I said in my Kimetsu no Yaiba reviews, that is an amazing feat, which goes to show how popular anime has become to such an extent where series can actually just blow up now and really just start to trend where everybody starts talking about it. It's kind of crazy to me. But, anyways, this episode was really emotional for a lot of reasons, but mainly because of Suneater. Suneater was the primary focus of this episode. We get to kind of see a little bit more about his character, why he is like he is, and kind of what his hero name really represents, Suneater. Now, Tamaki is a character that I've always truly loved. Ever since I read the manga and I saw this stuff in the manga, I've been a major fan of his character, and just watching this episode in anime form, like watching this scene in anime form, just really rekindled my love and passion for the character, and just really also showed me once again how amazing of a writer Horikoshi Sensei is, just to see how he handled his character, but also how he handled the three individuals that Suneater had to fight within this episode. This episode is a beautiful depiction on how good of a writer Horikoshi can be. And to just start off, let's begin with Suneater, Tamaki, and Togata's relationship. So Tamaki, as a child, he had to introduce himself when he went to a new school. And because of this, he was very awkward. He really did not know how to introduce himself. He really did not know what to do, which in turn caused his entire introduction to be a failure, where many in the classroom, or nobody in the classroom, really interacted with him at all, which he kind of expected because of just how much of a failure his introduction was for that school. But on top of that as well, he's used, or at that point in time, he was used to not having anyone, no friends, etc., because he's been failing in that department for a very long time, which kind of adds a little bit more to his character, why he has a lot of insecurities, self-doubt, and, he feels like he lacks self-worth. There is a lot of things that we could see from his character before this episode happened that shows that he feels these emotions, insecurities, and stuff, and this episode gives clarity to that, why he feels this way. You could see from his origin story within this chapter that he was someone that was very isolated. He had no one he could really talk to, and he wanted to introduce himself and be a hero, and one individual in that classroom noticed what he was trying to say, even though he messed it up, and that was Togata, which leads into the very important relationship between these two characters and kind of the dynamic of this arc of My Hero Academia ever since the introduction of Togata, or just the entire Big Three in general. And in this case, Togata was kind of like a shining light in Tamaki's life. Togata appeared out of nowhere, like a bright light, and opened up his eyes to where he realized that there could be much more in life. There could be something grander, something that can add actual happiness in his life, because he was in the darkness, sad, by himself, all alone and isolated, and when, Togata went out of his way and talked to him, it really made Tamaki feel appreciation. Which you can really see because of how the entire origin story of Tamaki starts is because of that. And kind of from that point onward, there has been gradual changes to where Tamaki has changed as a character and become someone so much better throughout the journey of his life. And so to get a little bit more into it, Togata's like, you want to be a hero, I want to be a hero, let's hang out, let's be friends. And it's just a really nice and beautiful interaction between the two individuals. Then we go forward in time a little bit further with Tamaki kind of showing off his quirk. His quirk is being able to, whatever he eats, he's able to kind of use it as an ability. For instance, if he eats octopus, he's able to, have tentacles grow out of his hands, etc. We see it within this episode. We know Tamaki's overall quirk is something incredibly powerful. I've talked about this in my previous episode reviews, so I'm not going to kind of reinstate that fact. It's just the point is, though, his quirk is ridiculous, but it isn't something that you could just fundamentally use instantly. It does take a lot of practice to be able to actually use something like that, which I will get into later on in this video. But the point of that flashback, though, when he was showing his quirk and you see like a little sprout come out, like a plant sprout come out of his hand, and you have the teachers like, look, you could definitely do a lot better than this. Because of the way your quirk is, you should definitely be able to achieve something much greater than just a little weed coming out of your, your hand. You see Tamaki, he gets very upset. You could just see by his overall expression that he feels sad, and then he kind of walks away and all that, and, he doesn't really get to demonstrate his quirk again. However, you see Togata, he kind of shifts over the entire POV over to him, and you see him fail miserably with trying to go through a wood wall. Now, this holds a lot of significance because it goes along with how the end of the last season was. We saw Togata absolutely decimate all of our main characters, just destroy them in 1v30 basically. Like, they couldn't do anything at all with him. That's how strong he was, which demonstrated that Togata is someone that is an exceptional hero with, it appears that he has a very strong quirk. Now, he does have a strong quirk, but at the same time, remember what we found out. Togata's quirk is extremely hard to use. Even though it seems broken, it's not. He has to fundamentally control every little aspect of his body that he makes it to where he can just go straight through. And also remember, when he does that, air passes right through him, sound passes right through him, he cannot hear, see, etc. Nothing, he has no senses. So in that entire moment, Togata literally is blind when he uses his quirk in certain aspects. So it's kind of scary, honestly. You can imagine the absolute terror of maybe this quirk happening and you falling through the floor and not even knowing anything. The weightlessness and darkness, not being able to hear or see anything, it's frightening. And we know he's taken a lot of time to be able to be where he's at right now. And in that moment, when he's trying to go through the wall, it shows that he's not really good with his quirk. He's practicing, he's not giving up, but he's doing his absolute best. And in that moment, it was a big wake-up call for someone like Tamaki, Suneater. He basically realized that Togata is someone that is always shining, someone as bright as a sun, but even though he's as bright as a sun, he has so many struggles every single day he has to deal with. You have the entire class laughing at him because he's not really able to go through a wall, and his quirk doesn't seem to be anything crazy and very hard. The way you see the entire interaction, you would normally see someone in Togata's position be like Suneater, Tamaki. Be very sad, very depressed, not being able to do anything. But despite everything, Togata never let it get him down, and he continued pushing forward without giving up, and that is beautiful, which is why Tamaki constantly called Togata like the sun, shining bright like a sun, because he never wavered even though darkness was surrounding him. And when Togata kind of talks to him, and it's like, look man, you are always calling me the sun, but at the same time, you could be something more shiny or bright than me. And it was a big moment for Tamaki, because he realized just how he feels about Togata, like he's a best friend, like he has really just inspired him to never give up. And that kind of relates to the final moments of the episode, when he's having this entire flashback and he's realizing kind of what his name represents, but also Togata and his unwavering spirit. It inspires Suneater to not give up against his adversary and continue to press forward, and he officially becomes his hero title, Suneater, at the end, when he's like, I will devour the sun. I can devour everything, basically. I can be greater than the sun itself, which is Togata. But he even says, and he makes a little analogy, like, even though I am a Suneater, I can't necessarily eat my friends. And it's kind of like, goes along with the whole friendship power thing that we saw with the villains, which I'll get into in a second. But it's just a really beautiful episode for Tamaki's character, just seeing exactly how he became what he is now, and how he really had a major wake-up call. He realized he isn't worthless, he can be something very special and important, and his quirk can be something that could help almost in any situation depending on what he eats. It's just great. And I know many might instantly assume, but it's obvious this quirk is strong. Even if you are gifted with a quirk and you have everything, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have all the confidence in the world. That's not how life works. That's not how emotions work with a human being, and it isn't that simple. It isn't that simple for someone that is probably given a very powerful quirk just to be happy with their situation or think they're powerful. Tamaki, in this case, he just had a very dark upbringing, and thanks to certain individuals, really pulled him out of that slump, and that's where he's at right now. So, it's great. So, let's get into Tamaki's quirk and kind of how much training and effort he's put into it before I get into the villains of this episode and what they were doing against Tamaki. You see to where he's constantly having to, like, assemble different animal parts coming out of him. For instance, the octopus tentacles when he used the kraken, and when you see he turns his fist basically with the sheer muscle of an octopus, he also puts, like, shells on it, which represents how much precision he has to use to be able to fundamentally understand how to use said creature in a certain way, but also how to form it on his body to be able to fight back. And basically, he's super powered and up the durability of his fist when he hit the villain in this episode, which is something that goes to show you the amount of precision that he needs to be able to use a quirk like he does, especially to be able to wrap it around his body like he did when he made it the kraken and all that. There's a lot of things about his quirk that seems relatively easy at first, but you have to be able to understand the creature that you're potentially eating or the plant, etc., to be able to utilize it. And also, this episode does clarify it isn't just, let's say, meat that Tamaki eats. If he eats, let's say, something like a plant or even a crystal, he's able to utilize those type of abilities. So that's the point I was getting into a couple of episode reviews back. When it comes to Tamaki, the question I've always had ever since I first found out about his quirk is, like, what happens if he devoured someone? If he was a villain, obviously. And it's an interesting question, because you can see in this episode, when he eats the dude's quirk, he eats, like, the crystals that he produces from his body, Tamaki's able to utilize that. Which is basically saying if Tamaki's able to eat, let's say, someone's quirk in a certain way, he could theoretically use their quirk temporarily. That's kind of scary to think about, because that really opens up Tamaki's skill set quite a bit, depending on how he wants to use it. Now, we don't necessarily know if eating what he ate within this episode is good for his health, but overall, though, it does show even if he eats something that theoretically he shouldn't eat because it's technically not food, he could still utilize it as power, because that crystal he ate, he was using it to be able to power himself. So, enough with that. Let's talk about the villains and their role and kind of what Tamaki did against them. So, I think everybody that's watching My Hero Academia has probably seen it one or two times in the past with shows or manga they have read, to where there is a trope like friendship power-up. Now, not to make fun of the series, even though I've made fun of it many times in the past, Fairy Tail is a very good example of friendship power-up. It is something that uses friendship power-up almost for every single fight, and it is something that has constantly, it abused it to the very ends of the earth, to where many just started making fun of Fairy Tail. And basically, it's very refreshing to see a trope like friendship power-up, which is usually reserved for heroes, the main character of the story, for the villains. That's what makes this fight very beautiful, because you see these villains, these three individuals that obviously may not be any good at all. They're not good at all, but they have some redeeming qualities to them because of what they stand for and how they actually do have bonds with each other. Basically, the individuals start to say, even though they're trash, they have their bonds as trash. Now, that's quite a quote. But the point is, though, they realize their self-worth. They realize that at the end of the day, they are technically garbage of society. At least how society views them, they are garbage. But even though they're garbage, someone went out of their way, found them, and said that they had a use. And basically what this meant is that these individuals that Overhaul has basically got under his wing, they're individuals that are very aware of their position in life, their position in society, that they are basically worthless. But even though they're worthless in society, Overhaul still has a use for them. Basically, they're individuals that should have been long dead. Individuals that don't really have a purpose anymore. And with Overhaul giving them purpose, they're willing to lay down their life and give up their life, because without Overhaul, they wouldn't have a life to begin with. So that's kind of their reasoning. They're not actually following Overhaul out of fear, which is something that makes a really scary villain, because it's easy to kind of have villains follow you out of fear, and then there's other villains that really manipulate you to follow them out of care and compassion. Now that right there is the scary villains, which is kind of what you could say All For One did, and how he handled his entire villain operation. Did he manipulate everybody to be his friend, basically, and they had this bond with him, and because of that bond, they were willing to lay down their life for him. That's what I think really makes a terrifying villain. And in this case, that's kind of what happened here, that these three villains that were fighting Tamaki were using their power of friendship, in essence, their version of power of friendship, and they were trying to fight back, and they were utilizing all their quirks together to be able to take down Tamaki. It was a really awesome display of teamwork, which is something you don't normally see in a shonen. Seeing villains working together with their quirks beautifully and not trying to stab each other in the back. Truly working together. And that's what all three of them were really doing. They didn't want to harm each other, etc. It's crazy to think about it. And Tamaki kind of exploited that weakness, that they would not harm each other because they technically are friends. And it's kind of like a very villain move, honestly, to where Tamaki used the power of friendship against them. Their very teamwork is the reason why they lost. He ripped them apart thanks to their teamwork and exploited their weaknesses because of that. And like I said, it's refreshing to see something like this in a shonen manga. I can expect this in something like a seinen manga, Berserk, etc., but you don't normally expect it in a magazine, like a manga, that is literally meant for, like, friendship power, working together, you need help, etc. But in this case, Tamaki was by himself. He had no backup technically there. He had to stand by himself against these opponents that were outnumbering him, and technically had quirks that could easily overpower him if Tamaki was not ready to face them. So that is the point here, is that they're bonds, and basically their brainwashing is just scary, but also very, very refreshing. So, great episode of My Hero Academia for that fact alone. It's what really made me appreciate this arc of My Hero Academia, but also made me appreciate Horikoshi as a writer because of how he utilized such a common trope in such a way that flips it on its head. So, with all that out of the way, there's a few other little things to talk about before I kind of wrap up this video, and that is basically the whole environment shifting. So the environment is currently shifting in the entire underground hideout thanks to an individual that has a quirk that can enter into walls, etc. and manipulate it. It's an incredibly strong power. However, we come to find out within this episode that the individual that has this power apparently could only actually move a fridge. But from what we see within this episode, he's able to manipulate pretty much the entire underground hideout, which is absolutely scary. It goes to show how the quirk-enhancing drug can really amplify someone to such an extent. Imagine if someone had a really powerful quirk. Example. Let's say, I'm trying to think of a good example here. Let's say Bakugo. I know Bakugo would never do it, for obvious reasons. He's a hero. But let's say Bakugo somehow took the quirk-enhancing drug. Imagine how much more powerful he would be if he used something like that. That's kind of scary to think about, or someone like Todoroki was to do it. And now, like I said, they would never do it, but imagine if, the hypothetical of just how strong their quirk could be because of this quirk-enhancing drug. It made someone that's only able to move a fridge being able to move an entire underground hideout. Now, obviously, this quirk-enhancing drug might have different effects depending on the quirk, but it really just goes to show that how impressive this drug really is, but also how scary it can be if it got into the wrong hands. Imagine an extremely powerful villain basically using that. Like, example, All For One. If he was to use that, which he wouldn't need to in the first place, but if he somehow used that, just imagine how much more powerful he theoretically could be. It's scary. So, yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about that before I wrapped up this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.